And this is why I think mental blocks are, I don't understand. I pay all this money. Why don't you throw the skill? You should throw the skill. Just do it. That's not going to help anybody. When an athlete develops a mental block, my first instinct is not to push them harder. It's because at the end of the day, most mental blocks aren't about fear. They're about a lack of... What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bonde on Cheer. My name is Bonde, and here we have honest conversations about coaching, business leadership, and long-term athlete development in cheerleading. So today, we have a special topic. We're going to be talking about mental blocks. This is a big one. It's like the word that you don't say. It's like Voldemort. You're just like, he who shall not be named. This is the thing that shall not be named in the sport of cheerleading. This is one of those topics where I'm going to rely heavily on my experience as a coach working with athletes through mental blocks. Not because the science doesn't matter, it obviously does, but I'm not going to get into the neurology and the psychology of mental blocks. A, I'm not that up to date on it, and B, I just want to lean on my experience because we're not going too deep here. It's just going to be surface level. Over the years, I have worked with athletes across the country, across the world, all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different ages, all different languages. I've seen mental blocks in every corner of the earth, and I have helped many athletes work through them. So I'm going to talk about some very clear patterns that I've noticed in mental blocks. And hopefully if you or somebody that you know or your athlete as a coach or a parent, if they're going through something that seems to be a mental block or if anything sounds familiar, then hopefully I can provide you some insight as to what's happening and then maybe get into some ways to help. But that might be a different episode depending on how long this gets. So when an athlete has a mental block, there are two things that I hear all the time. And this has been consistent across the board with almost every athlete that I've worked with that has had a mental block of some kind. First, they don't like running tumbling. They prefer standing tumbling. And when I say standing versus running, it's more so connected tumbling. They don't like connected tumbling. They like single skills. That's it. And the second is that they say, I'm not scared. My body just won't go. And those two things might seem to be unrelated, but I think that they're deeply, deeply related to one another. And I'm going to explain why I think that and the patterns I've seen that confirm that. Let's start with the standing tumbling or the non-connected tumbling. That's one and done, right? You get set, you take a breath, you go, and then it's all gas, no brakes until you're done with the skill. Now with connected tumbling, you can connect a bunch of skills, but the second you do like a round off and a back handspring, those two skills are now connected. And so round off handspring tuck, round off handspring whip, back handspring layout, like the more you add, the more connections there are, the more you have to do without thinking about doing, because after this comes this and it's fast. Round off into a back handspring is like instant. You don't really have time to think. It's like the back handspring starts the second you're reaching for the round off. Like you are putting yourself in a position to do the back handspring. That's what the round off is for. And if you're doing a tuck, then you're putting yourself in a position to do a tuck. Like that round off handspring almost becomes one skill because what you're doing is preparing yourself for that big rebound to throw the tuck. And this is where I think we start to see our first issue. When there isn't time to think, we start to see that athletes with mental blocks get worried. Like I said, they always say, I'm not scared, my body just won't go. And I think that's a protective mechanism in some way, shape, or form. I usually believe them when they say they're not afraid of the skill. What I think that they're afraid of, whether it's conscious or unconscious, is hesitating during the connection. Like they're not sure that they're going to connect the round off and the back handspring, but if they do the round off correctly, they don't really have a choice. The back handspring is going to happen, and if they're not ready for it, then they're afraid they're going to hesitate. So if you spend any time around cheerleading or gymnastics, if you have a background in it, you had an athlete in it, you were a coach, whatever, you know that injuries happen when athletes hesitate. Okay, hesitation is what leads to injuries, like 9 out of 10 times. Athletes rarely get injured because they full sent a skill. Injuries happen when an athlete starts a skill with full force and full confidence, then they question themselves, they hesitate, now they're upside down in a compromised position, and they fall to the ground in that position. And that's when bad things happen. And athletes know this, whether or not it's happened to them, or they've seen it or not, it's just intuitive. It's like if I stop in the air while I'm flipping my body and I don't execute from start to finish, chances are I'm going to come back to the ground because gravity is always on. There's no avoiding that. But I'm going to come back to the ground in a position that I'm unsure of what that is. I don't know if it's my feet. I don't know if it's my hands. It could be my back. It could be one foot. It could be my head. It could, whatever. But in a position that you're unsure of what it is and you have no control over, because when you stop, now you're just basically falling through the air. So when an athlete says, I'm not afraid of the tuck, my body just won't go, they're afraid of the hesitation. They're speaking about the hesitation. They're not afraid of the skill. They are afraid of hesitating. And that hesitation they know is going to lead to injury. And this is why I think mental blocks are trust problems. Not necessarily trust in the coach, not necessarily trust in the equipment, but trust in themselves. They don't have trust in themselves. The athletes don't trust that they'll fully commit once they start. They don't trust that they'll fully commit when the time comes for the tuck or the handspring or the connection. And that uncertainty creates hesitation. Hesitation creates fear. Fear creates the block. So where does this lack of trust come from? That is the difficult part. That's the question that if we could answer, mental blocks would basically just vanish off the face of the earth. In the cheer industry, gymnastics industry, anybody, any area of having a mental block, gone, right? But it's not that simple because the source could be literally anything. It could be an injury. It could be a bad experience. It could be a coach. It could be a home situation. It could be a parent. It could be a lack of technical skill. It could be a lack of mental preparation. It could be a lack of physical preparation or physical capacity. Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not obvious. And as coaches, we need to be careful here. This is where we need to make sure we're walking the fine, responsible line. We're coaches. We have a sphere of competence, okay? We're not counselors. We're not therapists. We're not psychologists. A good coach can obviously have an amazing impact on an athlete with or without a mental block. But with a mental block, a coach can be a great resource helping an athlete work through. But we have to stick to our scope of competence. We have to stay within what we know. So coaches, instead of trying to tackle and address every possible cause, pick out the ones that you as a coach are directly in control of or the ones that you can influence the most. And parents, you as well, you have a huge role. So coaches, parents, athletes, when you start experiencing or your athlete starts experiencing a mental block, the first thing we should do is pause, okay? Everybody needs to just chill out. We got to back up. All right, the more we look at an athlete and say, I know you can do it. You have the skill. I saw you throw it last week. If you don't throw it, then you're off the mat. If you don't throw it, you're not at this competition. If you don't throw it, you're going to JV. That is not going to help. Everybody just needs to take a deep breath, okay? The athletes have those words just literally spiraling through their mind then every time they're tumbling. I can't tell you how many times I've seen an athlete struggling with a mental block in the gym working, and when they're standing there and they won't go, the first thing they do when they try to go and stop is look over to see if the parent is watching. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. We probably got mom and dad sitting there being like, I don't understand. I pay all this money. Why don't you throw the skill? You should throw the skill. Just do it. That's not going to help anybody. First step, everybody, back up, lay off. Coaches, parents, athlete, you got to pull off yourself. Parents, you got to pull off the athlete. Coaches, you got to back up. When an athlete develops a mental block, my first instinct is not to push them harder. It's to back up. Take them away from the thing that's creating anxiety. Shift their attention somewhere else productive. The biggest mistake that a lot of people make, coaches and parents and athletes, is thinking the only way to improve tumbling is to just continue to throw tumbling. That's simply not true. There are countless number of ways to improve stunting and tumbling without actually doing the stunting and tumbling. And that's especially important and true when you're dealing with a mental block. Because remember, the goal isn't just skill development. It's building trust again. And this is where the big five become extremely useful. We've talked about it in other podcasts, so piggybacking off this one, the big five: shapes, speed, timing, pressure, and placement. These 5 things can be the key to getting rid of an athlete's mental block. I've used it so many times and it has worked almost every time. The beauty of the big 5 is that every single one of them can be trained and worked and improved on and progressed without actually having to do the specific skills, the tumbling or the stunting. So while they're rebuilding confidence and trust in themselves, they're actually getting better and making progress towards their tumbling or their stunting. Shapes are something that we overlook. When we have athletes working back handsprings and tucks and round-offs and handstands and all of that, oftentimes, you take an athlete that's got pretty decent tumbling, let's say round off 2 handsprings, maybe even a round off 2 handsprings and a tuck, ask them to hold a hollow body shape. chances are they can't hold a good hollow body. Ask them to do hollow body rocks. Chances are they can't do good hollow body rocks. They don't have the mechanics. They don't have the understanding. You can do so many different things with an athlete that's going to improve their tumbling, because tumbling is just creating shapes. But it's creating shapes very quickly. So if we can't create those shapes in an isolated environment where we're just creating the shape without the tumbling, well, then we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of great work that can be done. And everybody wants to wonder why gymnasts are such great tumblers. So it's because every event that they're on, they're working the same, like open, controlled arches and hollows, right? When we're on bars and we're learning giants or we're learning kips, and everything is passing through the same shapes that we create when we tumble. So they're just getting shape work everywhere they go, not to mention the conditioning. So shapes are a big one we can work without having to throw anything. Speed. Speed is one of the most important elements of cheerleading. If you can't move quickly enough, then you cannot perform a skill. You have to be able to move quickly enough. There's a baseline requirement for speed, and if you don't have it, then you're going to make your tumbling way harder. And not just that, but more dangerous. There's going to be higher risk of injury. We can train speed in so many different ways. The gym is one of the best places to train speed. That could be box jumps, depth drops, weighted jumps, band work, sprints. So many different ways that we can work speed that translates directly into our tumbling and stunting, but you don't even have to be tumbling or stunting. Now, timing. How do you work timing without doing stunting or tumbling? It's to count, and how does that one work? Well, there's a lot of drills you can do that involve the same equipment that I've already mentioned with the bands and the boxes and barbells, where you're moving to count. It's not simply just rhythm. It's, can I move my body under a constraint that is time? So this could be tempoed movements, tempoed squats, tempoed jumps, tempoed drops, right? Where we jump, we hold, then we move again. So there's tons of things you can do. I've used a metronome for different squat tempos and bench tempos. I've used a metronome and counting for different sort of like agility drills and box movements. So there's so many different things that you can do to help with an athlete's ability to stay on time that, again, are not even the stunting or tumbling skills specifically. Pressure is an easy one. It's arguably one of the most important of the big five, even though they're all probably equally important, because if any one of them is lacking, then it's going to make the others more difficult. We're going to have to compensate. Pressure is simple. Pressure is an understanding thing. If you put an athlete in a handstand, especially younger athletes, and you have them hold a handstand, you say, okay, if I'm falling forward, like if I'm falling this way, as if I'm going to have to fall into a bridge or forward roll, where do I put the pressure in my hands to be able to stop that? And they go, I don't know, right? It's those little things that help athletes go from good tumbler to great tumbler, because they start to understand the pressure. They can start to self-correct. But if an athlete doesn't even have an understanding of where the pressure should be in their hands to control a handstand, then how do we expect them to know how to control the pressure coming out of a back handspring, to be able to push them in the right angle, to be able to set them up to throw whatever it is they're doing after, another handspring, a layout, a tuck, a full? The answer is you can't really. You can't expect them to do that. So by working pressure in a controlled environment through handstands or even like bounding drills, a jump rope, for example. You know how many athletes I've taken into the gym that are working handsprings, right? Round-offs and handsprings, which is nothing but punching off the ground through your toes, and they can't jump rope. Like literally cannot jump rope. They like skip or they flat foot, and I'm like, you're trying to learn how to tumble. And we can't even jump rope. Like, let's learn how to bound and punch off our toes with a jump rope first. It's just, times have changed. I'm going to start doing hopscotch, I think, in the back. I'm just giant hopscotch. And when you're new to tumbling, we'll work some handstands, and then we're going to go play hopscotch for an hour. I actually think that would be better. No mental blocks there. Placement's a really good way for athletes to understand where things go, their hands, their hips, their feet, with regard to whatever it is that they're doing, a stunt or a tumble skill. You can do this with boxes on a ground where you actually have them. It's often done with little kids, and I think should be carried through with older athletes as well. You just give them a target. You give them a target for their hands, you give them a target for their hips, you give them a target for their feet, but you give them a very goal-specific exercise so that they're not focused really on the tumbling, but rather the placement specific exercise. And you don't even have to do this with any sort of round off or handspring or anything. You can do this with boxes on the ground. You could do this with agility ladders. You could do it with cones. You could do it with hurdles. You could do so many different things to place your hips and your feet and your hands. The big takeaway from this is that what surprises most parents is the amount of progress you can make without even having to throw the skill that's causing an issue or any skill that's causing an issue. If it's multiple, all of the skills. And that doesn't mean that we avoid this skill forever. Eventually we have to it. But when an athlete is stuck, constantly forcing repetitions is very rarely the solution. Sometimes a better solution is to take the pressure off, rebuild the underlying qualities, reinstill that confidence, build back the trust. Because at the end of the day, most mental blocks aren't about fear. They're about a lack of trust in the face of uncertainty. And the fastest way to eliminate uncertainty is preparation. The more athletes I work with, the more I see and realize that mental blocks are not solved by sheer willpower. They're solved by building trust. Trust in the technique, trust in the body, trust in oneself, and trust in a coach can be very impactful here. All right, everybody, mental blocks, that was scratching the surface. There's so much more to uncover, which I'm sure I'll do in another episode, because mental blocks, I don't want to say are a passion of mine. I feel like that seems weird, but I hate watching athletes go through this. This is a struggle that is just really difficult to watch. So if there's anything that I can do to share this information to help an athlete, a parent, a coach have a better understanding, then excellent. That makes me extremely happy. This has been another episode of Bonde on Cheer. Thank you, everybody who continues to watch, support, follow, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will see you all in the next episode.